I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, issues flowing out of the tragedy in Orlando, Florida, when at 2:30 in the morning on June 12th, a lone gunman approached the Orlando nightclub Pulse, which is a favorite of gays in the community, and began a shooting spree that lasted for more than a half an hour, murdering 49 people, wounding another 53. Of course, in the aftermath of the shooting in San Bernardino, everyone immediately wanted to know if this was another terrorist act. Was this just a lunatic who had no connection to radical Islam, as was the tragic case of the Newtown shooter who murdered 20 children and 6 adults in a Connecticut elementary school in 2012? Or was the shooter somehow involved with ISIS or another Islamic radical group, or motivated out of sympathies for violent Islamic jihadism? Well, as I'm sure you know, in Orlando, the shooter made sure everyone understood he saw himself as part of the ISIS war on Western civilization. He said so in his own words when he called the police and told them, "I pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. May God protect him," on behalf of the Islamic State. And all America understood. This is the worst terrorist attack on America since 9/11. And yet, the administration seemed uncomfortable confirming the extent to which the shooter was committed to radical Islam. And in a decision that surprised, disappointed, and or angered many Americans, the administration decided to withhold the complete tapings, transcripts of the conversations between the terrorist and the police. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch went on the Sunday talk shows to say that only partial transcripts would be released to the public, ostensibly, according to the FBI and Department of Justice, because they did not want to provide the killer or terrorist organizations with a publicity platform for hateful propaganda, meaning they didn't want the name ISIS or al-Baghdadi to be what the public heard. But the American people would have none of it. And after a public outcry, the FBI and DOJ reversed position, explaining that the issue would become, quote, a distraction, unquote, to the investigation. Well, what's this all mean? And more people are asking why the president and American administration is so adamant about not using the phrase radical Islamic terrorism or Islamic extremists when talking about the war which America and Israel and the West is in today, a war with a radical wing of the Islamic community that is using verses in the Quran to justify their attempt to punish, to convert, to destroy the infidel, whether the infidel is a moderate Muslim, and moderate Muslims have been the most targeted group by ISIS and other jihadist groups, or whether the infidel is a Jew or a Christian, or simply part of Western civilization, which is viewed as decadent and corrupt and immoral. Why is it that what's so plainly obvious is being obscured by our president and his administration, to the point that a transcript or a tape of a conversation with a terrorist who has murdered 49 people in the name of Islam, that would be withheld from the public? Well, for some insight and opinion, I'm so pleased to have on our JBS phones from his hometown of Montreal, Canada, the founding director of ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, a person you've seen many times here on JBS, Dr. Charles Small. Charles, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you again, Mark.
Thank you. So, Charles, first of all, you're Canadian, not American, yet you feel the issue of how America and the entire Western world defines this threat, the threat it faces from Islamic extremism, is of importance to all of us. Explain why and define the threat from your perspective.
So, I think we've been discussing this, you and I and your guests, for unfortunately many years.
Yes.
And it's unbelievable to me that the most powerful democratic nation in the world, ultimately the nation that has been leading the world for the better part of a century, that the discourse is so confused in the United States right now. It is terrifying. It terrifies Canadians. It terrifies Europeans. It terrifies those who care about democratic principles and human rights. And I can assure you, it's also terrorizing people in the Middle East, where the death and destruction on a daily basis by radical political Islam, by jihadist Islamists, are killing people daily. In the last few years in Syria, in the last 3 years, there's more than 400,000 people that have been massacred. This will go down in history as a genocide. 12 million refugees from the region fleeing into Europe. And for some reason, the only country in the Western world where we cannot have an informed, calm, rational discussion on this issue is, tragically, the United States of America. Every other Western country, Canada, France, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Italy, they deal with this issue. The intellectuals, the media of record, and the policymakers are dealing with radical political Islam and the danger that it poses to its citizens, to women, to religious minorities, to moderate Muslims who are the greatest victim of this reactionary movement. And its policymakers deal with it. And for some reason, the administration and many of those who support the Democratic Party have been reluctant, if not negligent, to deal with this issue rationally. And just the final point, because I don't want to go on too long, but I think the longer that liberals, that Democrats, that mainstream Republicans, that intellectuals, that people who care about human rights, women, the gay community, the women's rights movement, the religious minorities, the Jewish community, the longer we remain stifled in our conversation, the more ripe this vacuum that has been created in the United States will be filled by reactionary forces, by people who will blame all Muslims for this reactionary social movement, people that will use this vacuum to their advantage and push back the advances of democracy and citizenship in this country. And we see this happening also in Western Europe. We really need to discuss this and understand this rationally and come up with concrete solutions to deal with this threat.
Okay, I want you to react to some of the things we have heard the administration and President Obama say in response to the criticism that he isn't using the phrase radical Islam or some variation of that theme. He says two things. The first thing he says is, what difference does it make if I use that phrase or I talk about global terrorism? We're in a war against global terrorism. Does it really matter, he says, if I use the word Islam connected to it? You seem to be saying it matters. Explain why.
Of course it matters. Of course it matters. For any problem, whether it's medical or it's a policy-related problem, or even if it's a problem with a member of a family, you have to identify the problem. You have to understand it. You have to come to terms with it. You have to make sure that when you identify the problem, you do it accurately and well. And once you identify a problem, then you can start to discuss therapies, solutions to the problem.
Charles, if Barack Obama says we're in a war against global terrorism, I want you to be more specific. What about that phrase, global terrorism? He's defining he's defining what what we're fighting against. He's just not using the word Islam. What does the word Islam bring to the description, which his leaving it out in some way detracts or hurts us? I want to understand. He's not saying I'm not talking about terrorism. I just don't want to call it Islamic. And then he explains why. But first, I want you to be specific. By leaving out one adjective, how does the president weaken our case?
Okay. It's sort of like saying, what happens if I call you up and I tell you I have a disease, but I can't name the disease, and you want to help me? Where are you going to send me? What doctor do you send me to? What specialist do you send me to? What hospital do you send me to? What do I need? What do I have to do, or what do I have to avoid? If we can't name the disease, the specific type of the disease, you can't find a solution. And today, tragically, radical political Islam, not Muslims, not Islam. In fact, Muslims are becoming or are the greatest victim of this violent reactionary social movement. And we who care about democracy, I was telling a friend the other day, I'm Jewish because my mother is Jewish. That's why I'm Jewish. But everybody who lives in a democracy needs to protect democratic principles and safeguard and build upon our democracy. It's not inherited. It's a work in progress, and every generation needs to step up to defend and expand democratic principles. And this reactionary social movement, which is killing hundreds of thousands of people and making tens of millions of people into refugees, from Orlando to Lagos, from Lagos to Damascus, from Damascus to Tehran, from Tehran to Cairo, to Libya, to Paris. The list goes on. And this is a perverted reactionary social movement with its roots in the Muslim Brotherhood. It's deep. This has been going on for 100 years. They have a philosophy, they have a theology, they have a political mission, and they have a military approach to dealing with their view of reality. And they're out to destroy democratic societies. It's stated that's their objective. And they're using anti-Semitism, European Nazi, fascist anti-Semitism at the core of this ideology. So they demonize the Jews, they focus on Israel, and while everybody is focusing on the settlements and Netanyahu and Zionism, people are engaging in genocidal violence. Mm-hmm. And to target a gay club in the United States of America is exactly consistent with this ideology, with this poisonous ideology. They call for the extermination of Jews and the killing of gay people. And they believe that if you kill a gay person, you are alleviating them of their suffering, that it's incumbent upon, according to the radical Islamists, it's incumbent upon a Muslim to kill a gay person to alleviate their suffering. They're doing a good deed according to this twisted form of religion and this reactionary social movement. So we need to understand this. Our best minds, our best philosophers, our best theologians need to really understand this deeply. Not our own reactionary supremacist politicians that are using it for their gain, but serious thinkers, serious journalists, serious policymakers, people who care about human rights, the rights of women, the rights of gay people, the rights of a citizen of a democracy to be equal under one legal system. Mm-hmm. And once we understand it, to develop strategies to stop this movement, to defeat its ideology, and to stand up for our democratic principles of inclusion, of respecting the other, not destroying the other.
I understand. Charles,
I think when the president, I was with you in studio during the attack on the Canadian Parliament.
Yes.
And it was, if you remember, it was too
literally
early. The facts were sketchy. And you asked me, what do you think is happening?
Yes.
And I told you on air, I'm sure it's an Islamist attacking the Parliament because we're at war with the Islamists. And who else would attack a Canadian Parliament in 2015? And I also told you that within hours, President Obama was going to stand up and say, we are the greatest friends of Canada, but it's too early to understand what's happened. It's too early to tell, and we'll let you know when we find out the facts. And then nothing is ever said again. He sucks the oxygen out of the debate, and this is creating a vacuum where some of the rhetoric in the United States of America, the anti-democratic rhetoric, which has now gone mainstream, is also a threat. And we see the rise of the Le Pens of the world and other fascists in Romania and Greece, in Italy, where the silence of the liberal intellectual, in which I consider myself to be one, is creating this dangerous vacuum. And we need, in my view, to name it, to understand it rationally, and to develop strategies not only to contain it, which is also a problem of this administration, but to defeat it.
Okay. I want to tell you now why I also think people are uncomfortable with the president's not using any phrase like Islamic extremism, radical Islam, etc. I think people worry that the real damage being done is to the psychology of those who are part of Islamic extremist groups, and that what the president is saying very subtly is, we're only so serious about fighting you that there's a feeling that if we really were committed to putting an end to ISIS, that we would have no hesitation to call ISIS what it is, as you describe it, a radical wing of Islam. By the way, you know, Charles, it's a straw man. I've never heard anybody say that it's all Muslims. Nobody. Everybody understands that it's an extreme wing of Islam, but it is a wing of Islam. It is definitely coming out of the Islamic tradition. And, you know, we had on JBS Mossab Hassan Yosef, who was also known as the Green Prince. He was the son of a Hamas, the Hamas leader in Gaza.
Right.
He ultimately was turned by the Mossad. He becomes now very pro-Israel, very pro-West, and he pleads with American Jewry and with Americans in general, pleads with us to understand it's not Muslims we are at war with, but there is a religious Islam that at the moment is out to destroy Western civilization. And again, I want you to react to this. The fear I sense from people is, if the president can't call it what it is, he's sending a message. And the message is, yes, we're against terrorism. And there's always been terrorism. But we are not ultimately committed to destroying it the way we've been committed to destroying other enemies. What's your reaction?
So I think it is a straw man, and I work with, we do a program where we train professors at Oxford University how to teach courses on contemporary anti-Semitism, and a significant part of the program is dealing with radical political Islam. Not Islam. We make the distinction very clearly to the scholars, and scholars understand it. And we work, a lot of the teachers who teach the professors from all over the world are Muslims who have watched radical political Islam rise because of its anti-Semitism. And because they're using anti-Semitism to silence or to placate many in the world, including in the West, these scholars watch their families, their mosques, their cities, their civilizations and societies being destroyed by this reactionary force. So if we care about the human rights of Muslims, this is something we really need to address. Mm-hmm. And I think going back to your question, it's also very important to put this into context. I think the administration, and not just the Obama administration, the engagement, in quotations, of radical political Islam by many American administrations has been going on for decades. But I think this administration, when the first foreign tour, the first major speech that Obama did was at Cairo, in the seat of Islamic thought at the Al-Azhar University in Cairo. And he invited the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the root of all the Shiite and all the Sunni Islamists in the world, from ISIS to the Muslim Brotherhood. It's different branches of the same tree. The root is in Egypt. The root is in the Muslim Brotherhood. And the administration invited the Muslim Brotherhood as guests to the chagrin of Mubarak and other allies in the region to the United States. and they were going to be engaged. The Brotherhood, the Islamists, were being engaged, and that was a signal that was sent. And I think between being supportive, I'm using the word in quotations, to varying degrees, to the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamists, by ensuring the transfer of up to $150 billion to the Iranian revolutionary regime, which also spreads a variation of this Islamist ideology, the inability to accept people who are different, the inability to accept the right of a woman to be equal under the law, the inability to accept other societies to flourish in its midst, and they're also an enemy of democracy according to their ideology. So I think when you empower, and I'm choosing this word carefully, when you empower the Muslim Brotherhood, when you empower the Iranian revolutionary regime, this is sending signals not just to the regime in Tehran, not just to the Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo. This is also sending signals to the alienated youth in Paris and in Antwerp, and also to the alienated young people in North America and even South America. And I think that this is, on the one hand, there is this engagement and recognition of the Islamists, and on the other hand, we are forbidden to speak about it, because if you're an intellectual today and you use the term jihadist or radical political Islam, as I do, and I will continue to do,
Yes.
then we are labeled as right-wing. That was up until recently, and now I may be labeled as something even worse, given the discourse in the United States. And I think to say, in the Department of Justice saying that they don't want to give voice to ISIS, and that's why they censored the transcripts, I think is an unbelievable argument when the news, the 24/7 coverage and assessment of the psychology and the sexuality and the class and the movement of the shooter has been unbelievable since this horrific murder massacre occurred. But there's been 24/7 news coverage. So by not saying what the ideology of the shooter was or the association he had to it is absurd. I would argue it's a cover-up. It's a cover-up. We need, the United States of America, one of the greatest parts of the United States of America is freedom of speech. The First Amendment, you shine light where there's darkness, and you speak, and you debate, and you argue. You don't silence. This is the cornerstone to the United States of America, and people are trying to silence debates, rational, important debates.
What are they trying?
Vacuum I think, is a threat to the stability of this country.
Charles, what are they trying to cover up? You use the phrase cover up. What do you refer? What do you, in your mind, what is the administration trying to cover up?
Well, I think the fact that in a country where you have the First Amendment and freedom of speech, as you said, I'm Canadian. In Canada, we have laws against hate speech. We have laws against incitement to hatred against an identifiable group. So we place limitations on our speech. I think it could be a good thing. But that's sort of the different legal and political, the differences in the legal and political culture between Canada and the United States. But in the United States of America, where there's such a staunch support of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, to have dispatches from 911 censored and keywords taken out, and then this is somehow justified that it's going to limit the sort of news coverage in a certain way, when in this country the news coverage has been constant. Every network flew down to Orlando and has been doing live coverage and writing about it in the printed media for 8 days nonstop.
So what were they trying to cover up?
Words taken out, and I think it's censorship. I think we need to inform the public what the threat is in a rational, liberal, human rights-minded manner, and to ensure that the Muslim community is not painted with this horrific brush of being radical or jihadist, because the vast majority, especially of American Muslims, have nothing to do with this reactionary social movement. But the longer the intellectuals and the leaders of our communities remain silent, the more this vacuum, the more the danger that more Americans, law-abiding, decent citizens are going to be painted with this horrible brush.
Okay. I only have a moment left, Charles. It's interesting to me, you faced a similar kind of what I would call reverse bias. ISGAP was initially housed at Yale, but after you brought in world-renowned professors from all over the world who spoke about the danger of Islamic extremism and of Islamic anti-Semitism, Yale suddenly wanted you gone. Speak to that for a moment and how what happened to you in some way mirrors what you're talking about today.
Right. So I think very succinctly, I only have a minute, but I would say, as Norman Potter said, that this is anti-Semitism is the hatred that we dare not speak its name. And we dare not speak its name because of the interest that people in power in this country have with anti-Semites, namely oil and trade and other geostrategic issues. And anti-Semitism and the discussion of radical political Islam, I would argue, gets in the way of some of these interests. Mm-hmm. And we've gone down this road. We've gone down this path in history. We know when people were working with the National Socialists in the 1930s as a way to stop the spread of communism and Stalinism, we know how that ended. And today, we look back at the last 8 years or the last 20 years, and we see the death toll is just rising and rising and rising, and still people don't want to study, to discuss anti-Semitism, global anti-Semitism, the reactionary forces that are pushing it militarily but also ideologically throughout the world are disseminating the lies that will never die. And our silence is now allowing the killing of Africans, Middle Easterners, and gay people in the United States of America as we silence our discussion. We have to open the debate, open the discussion, understand the ideology, understand contemporary anti-Semitism, and how anti-Semitism begins with Jews, but we know it never ends with Jews.
Yes.
It's not a Jewish problem. This is a human rights problem. It's a global problem that needs to be addressed because we can see it spreading to other parts of the world, and it needs to be understood and stopped.
Charles Small, you know how much I love you, and I think that you have become a very important voice on the world you were seeing and on the world scene in general. As soon as I know you're going to hang to Israel. As soon as you come back from Israel, I want you in studio. In the meantime, Kol Tuv Hatzlacha and all your work with ISGAP and all the fabulous work you do. You should be healthy and good and continue to talk, Charles. I hope everybody heard you very clearly on this edition of In the News. And I don't know why it isn't so obvious to everyone, and maybe it is. Maybe it's more obvious to people than we worry about. But anyway, Charles, thank you very, very much.
And Mark, I must say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your show and your station as these issues become more and more significant, not just to the Jewish people, not just to Israel, but to the world, to the global community. Your voice and the work that you and your colleagues are doing is so important. And also, I wish you all the best, good health, and much greater success for you and your colleagues at JBS. You're doing great, vital work.
Thank you, Charles. Be well, and we'll see each other soon.
Thank you.
There you have it, the thoughts of Charles Small, founding director of ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. I'm Mark Golub. Until the next time, be well, my friends.